The following program contains adult themes. Some scenes may be too intense for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Darcy Pierce wanted to be the best mother in the world, but she believed she couldn't get pregnant. Just how far would this woman go in her obsessive need for a child?
It just didn't seem possible that a woman for 9 months could convince her husband she was pregnant when she was not pregnant.
Darcy wanted what Darcy wanted, and Darcy got it. No matter what it took.
I find her crime to be the most horrible crime that I ever prosecuted in nearly 10 years at the district attorney's office.
This is Amelia. In July of 1987, Darcy Pierce walked into the University of New Mexico hospital carrying the newborn baby. Darcy claimed she'd given birth to Amelia out in the desert. But had she? A woman's desire for a family can be a natural, pivotal part of life. But when that need becomes obsessive, when that instinct becomes all-consuming, normal behavior ends and a dangerous passion begins. I'm Theresa Saldana, and this is Confessions of Crime. Using a taped interrogation made by the authorities, we will explore the desperate thoughts of Darcy Pierce. Darcy was a teenager who wanted children so badly that she would go to any lengths to fulfill her dream. In her own mind, she constructed elaborate fantasies of herself as a perfect mother, surrounded by a happy, loving family. All she needed was the children. And in her search for a family, Darcy Pierce became a dangerous woman, driven by impulses so strong that no one was safe. 19-year-old Darcy Pierce was married to Ray, who was in the Air Force. She desperately wanted a child. This desire was the prime force in her life. And in March of 1986, Darcy told Ray she was pregnant. But it was a lie, and it wasn't the first time she had told him such a story. She needed people to believe she was a mother-to-be. Darcy was very convincing.
She showed us how she had learned to move her rectus muscles, the muscles that go up and down the belly here, to make them move so that it appeared that a baby was moving. It was really impressive.
She never tried to hide her body from the people who were closest to her. She was quite proud of it. I talked to her father, who said he had felt her stomach and felt the child kicking. I talked to her mother, who had seen her unclothed and who had given birth to several children, who had said that was the stomach of a pregnant woman.
Darcy Pierce's strange need to invent pregnancies may have been triggered early in childhood, growing up in Portland, Oregon. Darcy was adopted when she was only 11 days old.
Darcy very early on developed an intense antipathy toward both her adoptive mother and father, even though by her own description they indulged her, they adored her, they gave her everything that a child could want. Nonetheless, very early on in Darcy's life, she began to fantasize killing her mother. And that fantasy of killing her mother persisted right through her teen years and into her early adulthood.
We know that she had a lot of emotional issues involving being an adopted child. We know that at an early age she was sexually abused. And we know that when any child is sexually abused at an early age, it sets up a dynamic that's very difficult and trauma-filled.
At 6 years old, Darcy became sexually active with her 7-year-old cousin. Now, the question becomes, where did that come from? Where did that knowledge come from? Why would she do that? She continued in a relationship, an active sexual relationship for a number of years with this cousin, and then they finally sort of broke it off.
Darcy began thinking about what it would be like to have a baby of her own. According to Darcy, she would put pillows under her clothing as she played as a very little girl, stuffing herself so that she would look pregnant, pretending that she was pregnant.
Darcy Pierce's childhood was bizarre and extreme. She grew up emotionally insecure and confused, uncertain of who she really was. Her natural mother gave her up for adoption, and Darcy saw this as a terrible rejection. She wanted to have children herself so that she could be the best mother in the world, the mother she never had. In 1985, when Darcy and Ray were unmarried but living together in Portland, Darcy had great news. She was pregnant. Her dreams had been fulfilled. But the fetus never developed. It was a molar pregnancy, and she miscarried. From that point on, Darcy believed that she would never be able to have children.
I think I put a lot on myself because I felt like, you know, any woman can carry a baby to term and have one. Why can't I? You know, what is it that I am so deficient that I can't do this? And so I was trying so hard to do it so I could prove to myself that I was capable of doing this basic function, and also the fact that there was such a void there. There's such an emptiness, such a longing, because I've always loved children so much.
She wanted a baby. She wanted the attention that having a baby would give her, and she was prepared to go about getting a baby in whatever way she could.
When she was living with Ray, she lived next door to her sister-in-law, who had a baby and brought it home. They came over to dinner at her house, and she was so thrilled about this baby, just elated that they would have this new baby. And then she offered her sister-in-law the opportunity to take turns nursing it, that since she lived right next door, that she would come over and nurse the baby. Obviously, first of all, the physiology of that, I'm a little confused how she would think that she could do that. But secondly, the shock of the sister-in-law that she would want to do that. But to Darcy, that seemed a perfectly normal thing.
From what I understand, Darcy had contemplated killing her mother at one time when she was younger, and had contemplated killing her sister-in-law and taking her sister-in-law's baby, being able to raise her sister-in-law's baby. What this shows is a behavior which could imagine and contemplate violence in order to get at her goal.
Shortly after her failed pregnancy, Darcy was working at a local clothing store. By coincidence, most of the other women working there at the time became pregnant, and Darcy reacted. Desperate to have a child, but convinced she was incapable of giving birth, Darcy retreated into her own fantasy world. As she would do again later, she now, for the first time, faked a pregnancy of her own. Then she told her co-workers she had had a miscarriage. The whole episode was a tissue of lies.
Darcy lied to the people she was working with, telling them that she was pregnant. Then they gave her baby showers and bought her baby crib or baby clothing and things for the baby crib and so on. And ultimately, Darcy had to extricate herself from that.
She told the people at the store she worked at that the baby had been stillborn, and received condolences and flowers from the people she worked with. In fact, there's one incident that we became aware of where a friend of hers talked with her on the telephone, and they both cried over the apparent loss of a baby that she had never been pregnant with.
Ray eventually discovered that that pregnancy was a complete fiction, and he was angry. Scared that he would leave her, Darcy invented another pregnancy, convincing Ray that this time was different. She really was pregnant. Ray believed her. They got married and moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. But again, Darcy's story was a lie.
Her history seems to show a person who goes after what she wants, who knows what she wants and goes after it, sometimes with a relentlessness.
She had friends go with her to Lamaze classes while her husband was away in the Air Force and in schools and so on. She visited doctors and had a lot of examinations by doctors. The doctors would tell her that she wasn't pregnant, but she wouldn't tell anyone else the results of those tests and so on.
She was probably close to 10 months pregnant by her accounts by the time she moved to Albuquerque. Friends, family members, and her husband began to be more and more inquisitive of where is the child, what's going on, the pressures were building and building.
As her due date loomed nearer and nearer, Darcy was caught in her own web of deception. What was she going to do? She had lied too many times to admit one more deceit. Could she find a baby and fulfill her own fantasy? Stay with us. Darcy Pierce was apparently due to give birth. Only she knew the terrible truth, that she wasn't really pregnant. Her friends and family waited for the birth of the child, but Darcy knew it was all a fantasy, a fiction born out of her hopes and dreams. What was she going to do? On July 23rd, 1987, she was in a panic. It was the day she had announced labor would be induced.
The initial obsession with having a baby was now coupled with the need to not be shown as being a liar or wrong, to not letting down other people. What was she going to do in terms of her credibility as well as having a baby?
She talked about going to grocery stores and taking children. She talked about going to hospital wards, baby wards, and taking children. These were items that she had considered and rejected because of the possibility of getting caught.
Darcy could not keep up her pretense much longer. Now she was desperately looking for someone who would provide her with what she so badly needed, a baby. And she found that someone in a woman named Cindy Ray. Cindy and Sam Ray had been married for 4 years. He was a military policeman at the Air Force Base, and they already had a 2-year-old son, Luke. In July of 1987, Cindy was 8 months pregnant with her second child. Unknown to Cindy, Darcy Pierce was in a panic. Her fake pregnancy had come down to the wire. Tuesday was the day Darcy was due to give birth. Could she admit her deception? Could she give up on her fantasy? Confused and locked in her own dream world, Darcy drove to the clinic. Outside, she saw Cindy going in for one of her regular tests. Darcy parked her car and waited for 2 hours until Cindy emerged.
A woman caught my eye, and she was very pregnant. And she had just climbed out of a red blazer, 4x4 truck. And I decided that I was going to wait for her to come back out, and I was going to talk to her and try to get her to give me her baby.
Cindy was about the same size, maybe a little smaller, but very similar in size. They had the same eye color, they had the same hair color, they had a similar build. And so I believe Darcy Pierce found somebody who would have a baby much like herself.
I asked her to get in the car with me, that I needed somebody to talk to, that I had some problems right now, I didn't know anybody, that I just needed to talk. And she looked startled, and I told her, I said, please, I just need somebody to talk to. I'm not gonna hurt you.
Darcy could think, I'll get the baby, I'll even get this woman to volunteer to give me the baby. That's how Darcy phrased it. I'll get her to give me her baby.
The two women started talking. They were both pregnant, or so Darcy claimed. Darcy acted unhappy and told Cindy she needed to talk. Both women had something in common. Their husbands worked at the Air Force Base. Darcy convinced Cindy to keep talking with her, and together they drove to Darcy's home. But Ray's car was in the driveway. Darcy panicked and made an abrupt U-turn. Now she couldn't let Cindy go, and they drove toward the mountains east of the city. Even at this point, no one but Darcy knows whether she was aware of what she was doing, of what she planned. And Cindy had no idea of what was in store for her. But when they stopped on a deserted road, everything changed.
We believe that Cindy was trying to keep Darcy calm, trying to keep her own baby safe, and trying in some way to talk her out of something she had no idea what was going to happen.
While we were in the car, I think I hit her in the head or something, and she started scratching me, and we fell out, and I really don't remember.
She was able to get a strap out of Cindy's purse. She took that strap, put it around her neck, and pulled it tight enough and long enough that Cindy became unconscious.
Darcy only vaguely remembers attacking Cindy. She recalls a struggle, but she claims to remember nothing of what happened next. In fact, what happened next is almost beyond belief. Darcy cut open the unconscious woman's stomach and pulled out her baby, still alive. Darcy then left the mother to die on the side of the road. Darcy's brutal obsession had given her a child, a baby she could take back and show to her husband, a baby that Darcy would claim as her own.
I don't remember how the baby came. The baby was just there, so I took it, and I pulled off my dress and wrapped the baby in my dress and put the baby against my chest because my slip was real low to keep the baby warm. And I got in the car and I was driving really fast. And then I started thinking, I can't just show up someplace with this baby in my arms around here and not have some kind of a story.
Darcy had a baby, and Cindy had lost her life. Darcy's obsessive fantasy had led to murder. But how did she think she could get away with this callous pretense? Would anybody believe that Darcy was the perfect mother? We'll continue in a moment. Darcy's dreams had been fulfilled at a brutal cost. She had a baby, someone else's baby. Now Darcy had to go home and persuade Ray and the doctors at the hospital that it was all real. She was running on adrenaline, panic, and her own bizarre plans and fantasies. After the murder, Darcy drove into town with the baby lying on the passenger seat. Along the way, she passed numerous exits leading to local hospitals. She kept going. She was drawn back home. Eventually, she stopped at a car dealership where an acquaintance worked, and she told him a story of a premature birth in the desert. She needed help, she claimed. Immediately, an ambulance was called, and Darcy was whisked away to meet her fate.
What she thought she could do, apparently, was go to the hospital, say, look at my baby. I want it checked. After all, if a midwife delivers a baby, you can do that. And then she wanted to be able to say, okay, now I'll go to my own doctor for my physical, and I'm okay. I'll sign a release. And I think she really thought she could do that.
In looking at the baby, which at that time was in the baby warmer, it was very interesting because this baby had a perfectly round head. It looked like a C-section baby. It did not look like a baby that had been delivered vaginally. It just didn't have that appearance. It had a round head, like a baby that we deliver by cesarean section.
How far could Darcy get with this wild scheme? She was inventive and driven by her urgent need to have a baby, to not expose her outrageous deceit. But now, at the 11th hour, fate stepped in. Sam, Cindy's husband, was worried. Cindy was late, 3 hours late. He called their midwife, who by an incredible coincidence was working that afternoon at the very hospital Darcy had been taken to. The midwife had no idea where Cindy was, but she had noticed Darcy's arrival in the emergency room. A strange woman with an unlikely story of a premature birth in the desert. Something told the midwife there might be a connection here, and the police were called.
What Darcy then did was shift gears in midstream and shift stories and start talking about having paid a midwife some $10,000 in order to obtain a baby from a surrogate mother in Santa Fe.
She would look straight in your eyes and lie to you. You knew she was lying to you. And just as cold as she could be, she would lie. And when you'd catch her in a lie and call her on it, she would look straight into your eyes and make something else up.
Trapped in her own deceptions, Darcy began to twist and turn. She invented more outlandish stories. Finally, the police made her hold the newborn child in her arms. With that tiny body cuddling against her, Darcy broke down. She cried and confessed. The following day, she took the police to where Cindy's body still lay. In the aftermath of the tragic death, Sam Ray took his baby home and christened her Amelia. Together with Amelia's older brother, Luke, they now live in Southern California, where Sam is a school teacher. Amelia is 4 years old, and her life, though changed forever by the brutal circumstance of her birth, is loving and happy. But Darcy Pierce was convicted of murder. How could she commit such a callous crime, lose control of herself to her fantasy of a perfect family? How could Darcy's need to have a child ultimately destroy another human life?
I equate what she did as being similar to someone who goes to a convenience store, takes a weapon, puts it to the clerk's head, and shoots that clerk in order to obtain the money or the drugs that they need. The desire is the same. The means used are the same. It's just that the product is so different.
Ultimately, Cindy Ray just became a vessel to her, a vessel that was carrying the thing that Darcy wanted, which was this baby. And ultimately, she just took this baby from this non-human vessel, which is what Cindy Ray became to her.
I don't forgive her. In a way, I can understand to a certain extent why she did it, in a way, but I don't know why she would do it like that. There's other ways to get a baby instead of by killing somebody.
How was it that Darcy Pierce became so lost in her own fantasies that she killed? The hormonal and social pressures to have children underpins much of American culture. But Darcy's maternal needs were so strong, so rooted in her own deprived childhood, that she lost control, lost sight of the havoc her obsession would create. Darcy felt her life was empty, felt that a family would fill the void of her own isolated childhood. But why did no one recognize her desperate need? Why did no one challenge her faked pregnancies? Perhaps it was all too bizarre to believe. It's a tragic irony that for Darcy to have the life she wanted so desperately, she felt she had to destroy another life, leaving behind a motherless child. Darcy Pierce, now divorced, must abandon her dream forever, sitting out the remainder of her childbearing years in prison, where she is serving a minimum of 30 years. I'm Theresa Saldana. Join me again next time for a unique journey into the criminal mind on Confessions of Crime.